Three typical real estate investing maxims are the 2% rule, the 50% rule, and the 70% rule. Investors can quickly sort through projects and determine whether or not to develop them by following a few broad rules. It's important to notice that I did not state that investors can use rules of thumb to direct their decision-making when choosing which investments to make, because they are not intended to be absolute rules. In essence, they help investors swiftly assess a range of important indications. Welcome to Financial Fluence. In this video, I'll teach you the rule of thumb in real estate investing. Let's now get going. First, one of the most popular heuristics among landlords is the 2% rule, also referred to as the 1% rule or the 2% test, but not because it's a regulation. For those who are still confused, I suggest the 2% test. To do this, just divide the monthly rent by the property's value as a percentage. Let's keep it straightforward. $2,000 divided by $200,000 equals 1% if a property rents for $2,000 per month and has a value of $200,000. In this case, the property barely passes the 1% test but fails the 2% test. Similar to the previous example, if a property costs $100,000 to buy but only rents for $1,500 per month, the property fails to pass the 1% criteria because 1,500 divided by 100,000 is just 0.8%. What if the property leases for $1,500 per month but is actually worth $100,000? 1,500 divided by 120,000 gives a percentage of 1.25%. This general rule of thumb may be useful to an investor in determining whether to pursue a certain property or not. Although it's not always accurate, a large percentage often denotes better cash flow. Both the location's cost and the actual cost of the property are important factors here. For example, if my real estate agent tells me that they have the best rental property for me to buy, and I see that the purchase price is $100,000 and the old rent is $1,000 per month, then I'm pretty certain that it will. Because I'm aware that the perfect home won't likely ever generate cash flow because it doesn't comply with the 1% criterion, I'm able to make a swift judgment in this case. If the cash flow were my only consideration, I probably wouldn't even bother looking at the deal any further. The significance of the 2% rule and the 1% rule test is that they can assist you in determining whether to continue looking into a rental property or not. How much cash flow we might anticipate from it has not really been disclosed. Investors frequently use the 50% rule of thumb for this. The 50% rule states that, on average and over time, half of a property's income is spent on operating costs. As for what those costs are, they include taxes, insurance, utilities, repairs, vacancy, and other costs that come out of the landlord's bank account every month, or, depending on how you want to look at it, every year. Investors may rapidly determine the cash flow of a rental property by using the 50% method, which sums up all of these costs into a single, straightforward number. Let's use the example of a house that rents for $2,000 per month to illustrate. The 50% rule states that expenses will account for 50% of this sum. Unless you paid cash for the property, in which case, let's say the mortgage is $600. This leaves us with $1,000, but we now have to pay the mortgage on this. If the mortgage is $600 and we have $1,000 remaining, how much do you have? Because $2,000 divided by 50% results in $1,000, and $1,000 less $600 for operational costs equals $400 in cash flow. You have $400. And before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on the notification bell to be notified every time a new video is uploaded. Let's return to the video now. Naturally, depending on the property, the 50% estimate for operating expenses can vary greatly. In some areas, taxes and insurance may be extremely high, but in other locations, they may be much lower. You can pretty well guarantee that a home won't generate a positive cash flow when you're looking at one that rents for $1,200 a month, and you know the mortgage payment would be approximately $1,000. This is because $1,200 times 50% is $600, and $600 less $1,000 equals a negative $400 cash flow. The 50% rule is currently used to keep real estate investors in check and to remind us that there are several fees that mount over time. A new roof, for example, is only required every 20 years. But dividing a $10,000 roof into 240 months results in a monthly cost of $42. These running costs increase over time, and most investors have found that, given enough time, they tend to settle around 50%. Now, for today's final rule of thumb, the 70% rule. The last two rules of thumb were meant to help people who own rental properties. But what about people who buy and sell houses quickly? I don't want to leave you out, so for those who are flipping houses, the 70% rule can help you determine how much to pay for a property. The 70% rule states that the most you should pay for a potential flip is 70% of the after-repair value. For example, if a hole would sell for $300,000 all repaired up, and the property required $50,000 in repairs to get there, $300,000 times 70% equals $210,000. Subtract $50,000 and you're left with $160,000. According to the 70% rule, the most someone should pay for that property is $160,000. But there are some issues with the 70% rule. This rule of thumb assumes that 30% of the ARV, the after repair value, will be spent on holding costs on the buying side, closing costs on the selling side, commissions, taxes, attorney fees, title fees, company fees, and more, and the flipper's profit and any other charges that come up during the deal. The 70% rule doesn't really apply to properties with really low RVs, such as those with an ARV of $50,000. As mentioned earlier, the 30% deducted from the ARV includes the holding cost and the closing cost, as well as the profit the investor, or flipper, wants to make. However, 30% of $50,000 is about $15,000. So, applying the 70% rule would only result in all fees, costs, and profits being added up to $70,000. The house flipper would only make $5,000 if the fees and holding costs totaled about $10,000. I don't know any house flippers who would be willing to take the risk of flipping a house for only $5,000. A wholesaler or flipper would overpay for the property if the 70% rule were applied. A similar issue arises with the 70% rule for more expensive properties. According to the 70% rule, a home with an ARV of $700,000 that needs $50,000 at work should produce a maximum offer of $440,000. However, an investor flipping houses at this level might require much less than 70%, perhaps 50% or even lower. A person who strictly adheres to the 70% rule is probably never going to find a good enough deal to ever flip a single property in that market. In this case, 80% or even 85% might be sufficient. However, finding a $700,000 property for $400,000 is simply not feasible in most markets. Also, some investors may have to pay more or less in fees and costs depending on where they live or how they live. For instance, closing fees for purchasing a property may be $3,000 in some areas, but $6,000 in others. While other investors might have to pay commissions when they actually sell the property, some investors may also hold a real estate license, which allows them to avoid spending thousands of dollars in commissions. As with any rule of thumb, no firm judgment should be made before conducting a real estate analysis on the subject property. How should the 70% rule be applied then? Carefully. It's a quick and dirty technique to estimate the approximate price you should pay for a property. And that's all. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoy similar stuff, check out my other videos. And if you like it, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. And I'll see you in the next video.